So, Superman released last week, and the grifters just don't know how to respond to it. Half of them are calling it woke, and the other half are saying it's not woke. And this is probably because none of them know what the word woke even means. Which is why the easiest dunk for people arguing against anti-woke losers on the internet is to ask them to define that word, which is usually met with a swift retreat. Which is why it's curious that the cynical grifter has decided to call Superman not woke, likely due to him sensing the film would be well received and make a lot of money. You know, something that goes against his mantra of woke thing bad and will fail. In other words, go woke, go broke, but if it didn't go broke, then it wasn't woke. I've noticed this myself, that when I gave examples of films that were woke but didn't go broke, the cope has been to suggest that those films were not woke. I still receive comments on my short from people claiming movies like Zootopia weren't actually woke. You know, the movie that's a thin allegory for race relations and how we should accept each other despite our various differences, a film that features a villain who is explicitly a prey supremacist. Yeah, very not woke, Sashomaru 1, you fucking idiot. I swear, you people have an incredibly difficult time understanding political themes in art. It's almost like you have zero media literacy or something.
Wait, is this fucking play about us?
And this is all because if these morons don't have an overarching narrative to follow, they don't know what to do. And that's because these people aren't film critics or reviewers. They are con artists that have found a lick, and their audiences are literally too stupid to realize they're being played. This is exactly why when The Critical Drinker tried to make a movie, it was hilariously bad, and now he needs a YouTuber to help him with his writing. And you know, I commend him for knowing his limitations, but how has this experience not humbled him? He's still shitting on movies that were made by people who have been proven to be more competent than him in this very space. If he had any shame, he'd have shut his critic reviews down, enrolled in a screenwriting course, and we wouldn't hear from him for the next few years. But no, he has a grift to maintain, as they all do. And that's why we are here today, to take a look at a bit of what a couple of film's biggest grifters have to say about Superman.
Honestly, I go away on holiday for a few days and what feels like the biggest controversy in pop culture blows up across the internet. Out of all the movies I expected to be a lightning rod for conspiracy theories, political tug-of-wars, and the kind of explosive fan warfare that makes the Snyderverse look like a polite disagreement over afternoon tea, the last one I predicted was James Gunn's Superman by James Gunn.
Well, that's because you spend the majority of your time worrying about the black to white person ratio in films and whether that makes a film woke or not. Imagine being a film YouTuber and not knowing Snyder cultists are some of the biggest crybabies on the internet, rivaled only by you bitches when black people are on your movie screen. They've only been complaining about this film since Gunn was announced as the head of DC 3 years ago. But I guess when you're complaining about Brie Larson and Daisy Ridley every other day, you tend to develop tunnel vision.
But not to worry, dear viewer, because the drinker is back to bring order out of chaos, restore balance to a world gone mad, and pronounce the final verdict on James Gunn's Superman by James Gunn. And damn man, what a delightfully optimistic, frustratingly flawed, and thoroughly weird movie this turned out to be. On the plus side, the casting is excellent. David Corenswet turned out to be a perfect choice for the Man of Steel. The script doesn't try to diminish or deconstruct him just to massage some smug filmmaker's nihilistic ego, but instead presents him as a flawed but good-hearted man doing his best to navigate a complex world. There's a strong theme of heroism and positivity running through the movie, a refreshing lack of political agenda, and some genuinely great dramatic moments that made me think, yup, James Gunn's Superman by James Gunn actually understands what people want from a Superman movie.
So this reminds me of a hilarious tweet you made the other day, Drinker, where you claimed that people are trying to make Superman political and that they should just judge a film as a film without politics. Naturally, this was my reaction to this message coming from you.
Really, motherfucker?
You see, this is what you do. You and your ilk are the ones that can't judge a film on its own merit and have to stupidly seek out things to be mad about because of your primitive and backwards politics. If you aren't whining about Peter Parker being the only white guy in Across the Spider-Verse, you're calling Alden Ehrenreich the only white guy in Ironheart.
Oh my goodness, what are the chances that the one and only white guy in this show would turn out to be a completely submissive pussy?
Funnily enough, your Nazi audience members don't seem to realize that Alden is Jewish and that this is further evidence that you consider Jewish people to be white. But I digress. Because of your stupid, simplistic worldview that the heroes and good guys should nearly always be white men, you fail to recognize that this movie, like most art, is political. You somehow miss the fact that Superman sparks an international conflict by stopping an obvious pastiche of Israel from invading an obvious pastiche of Palestine. It doesn't get more political than geopolitics. But because you're a 17 IQ culture warrior, you think politics is when a woman is in a leadership role or a drag queen is cast in a show that stars a black superhero. This film is also about an immigrant, something Gunn states explicitly. Given Trump almost assuredly became president due to the desire of his followers to kick immigrants out of my country, you can also argue that this film is pro-immigrant. Another political stance. But like most of you racists, including the president himself, when an immigrant looks like a white person, all of a sudden immigration is okay. And that's why you didn't notice it, drinker, because Kal-El, a literal alien, looks like a white guy. Hence, your stupid ass thinking there are no politics in this film.
But Birdman, Drinker does talk about the immigrant thing in this video. See? Watch.
There was also a pretty huge fucking debate raging around whether this film had some political axe to grind, mostly due to a misquoted Variety interview with James Gunn that was then amplified by absolute retards like Mark Melkin. You can almost feel how desperate he is to lead the cast into saying something, anything controversial for clicks and retweets.
Superman is an immigrant story, that it is political. MAGA today was getting a little upset that he called Superman an immigrant. I wanted to get your reaction. Your brother talked about Superman being an immigrant, and now MAGA is already upset that he's called Superman an immigrant. I wanted to get your reaction. You said it's an immigrant story. It's a political movie. MAGA today is going nuts. What do you have to say to MAGA?
This is the irony note. I'm gonna play it every time the drinker says something bitingly unaware.
Seriously guys, in case you haven't figured it out by now, entertainment journalists are not your friends and never have been.
Thanks, Pillar of Garbage. As you can see, neckbeard critical drinker fans will conveniently cut off Sean Gunn's response to that question while simultaneously claiming it's entertainment media that are the dishonest ones. Well, I just so happen to have the full interview, and this is what Drinker doesn't want you to see.
Your boss, your brother, talked about Superman being an immigrant, and now MAGA is already upset that he's called Superman an immigrant. I wanted to get your reaction.
My reaction to that is that it is exactly what the movie is about, I think, that, we support our people, We love our immigrants. Yes, Superman is an immigrant, and yes, the people that we support in this country are immigrants, and if you don't like that, then you're not American. People who say no to immigrants are against the American way. They're against what the American dream is all about.
Truth, justice, and the American way.
Absolutely.
As for James Gunn himself, he was a bit shy about answering the question, but this was not a misquote. He actually said Superman was an immigrant. The quote itself came from an interview with The Times London, not Variety. Here's the exact quote in its full context, and this is, without a doubt, James Gunn calling Superman an immigrant. Coupled with what his brother Sean said, how on earth are you trying to frame this as the wokies misquoting him and trying to make it political? You are yet again demonstrating that you don't know what you're talking about. I should make a video on how you get your information from other anti-woke losers on YouTube like Midnight's Edge, which is why your footage has his watermark on it, hence you repeating his same wrong talking points. But your audience doesn't really care, and my audience already knows you're a dishonest piece of shit, so what would even be the point? Anyway, I don't much care for the rest of this man's review as its standard critical drinker fare, like taking random shots at modern Hollywood where he praises Rachel's Lois Lane for not being a girl boss, when we all know if Rachel Zegler or Brie Larson were in this role and literally nothing else changed, he'd be singing an entirely different tune like the hypocrite that he is. Let's move on to Drinker's pet dog. As you can see from Nerdrotic's title, he has once again gotten his marching orders from Master Will and is unsurprisingly parroting the same sentiment that his owner taught him to, that Superman is not political and is a disappointment. Apparently, it doesn't matter what the consensus on this film is. If Daddy Drinker says it's not woke and a disappointment, Gary's gonna follow in his father's footsteps. Let's see what the critical Nerdrotic has to say.
So despite what James Gunn says about James Gunn's DCU, Superman needs to not only be a hit, it needs to be a walk-off home run. And as far as the marketing for this film is concerned, which is really important on a scale from Rachel Zegler to 10, I'd give it a 6. If you take James Gunn out of the equation, I'd give it an 8. But at least as far as insufferable political Hollywood was concerned, they pretty much stayed out of it until now. Thanks to Variety's Mark Milken, the bane of the adult pretender and friend of YouTubers everywhere.
James has said that Superman is an immigrant story, that it is political. MAGA today was getting a little upset that he called Superman an immigrant. I wanted to get your reaction.
It's almost like we all have collective deja vu, isn't it? You see how these low-effort videos are made now. These two just wait for the other to make a video, and whoever does it second essentially copies the first. I mean, what are the chances that these fools just so happen to talk about the same Variety interview when these videos are supposed to be reviews of the Superman film itself? I mean, it says so in Gary's own description. What do these interviews have to do with a review of Superman?
What did you just say?
Nothing, just had a little deja vu.
And I'm not kidding. These two just copy whatever the other is doing. It's uncanny. Will makes a video specifically talking about girl boss fatigue. 2 fucking days later, here comes Gary with a girl boss video. Drinker thinks Mission Impossible sucked? Well, so does Gary. Will thinks Superman is a beautiful mess and just okay. Well, Gary has that exact sentiment in his video, only he forgot he titled his video Total Disappointment. That's not what just okay means, Gary. Seriously, I challenge any of you to find anything these two dorks disagree on. Just like the buses they rode to school, that list is gonna be short.
That was certainly the last thing James Gunn and the Warner Brothers executives needed, but not to worry. The Warner Brothers hand-picked social media influencers who were offered a free screening and free drinks are here to the rescue with a diverse set of unique and authentic reactions.
Hashtag Superman is a triumph for the new DC universe. It's a comic book movie brought to beautiful live-action life, brimming with hope and fulfillment. It actually elicited tears of joy from me. Hashtag Superman is a triumph for the new DC universe. It's a comic book movie brought to beautiful live-action life. Hashtag Superman is the perfect comic book movie. It felt like I was at my local comic shop reading a Superman book as the characters leapt off the pages.
The irony of this pet dog who is doing the same thing his owner is doing, trying to call out people for dishonest reviews. You can't make this stuff up. I wonder if Gary will bring up the copy pasta Ironheart reviews that were made before the show even released. I won't hold my breath on that one, though.
But that's not the only problem, and you're going to hear this from a lot of people, including the ones who like it. Tonally, it's an absolute mess. Superman's James Gunn is a direct response and a polar opposite of the Snyderverse. The problem is, it's a complete overcorrection, and it doesn't really know what it wants to be. But the good news is, it's not the worst superhero film this year, and it might end up being the best, which admittedly isn't saying very much. The better news is, it isn't woke. Unfortunately, that isn't enough.
We are brought back to the opening of this video, where anti-woke dipshits demonstrate they don't know what the word woke means and that they use it to mean almost anything. For the umpteenth time, woke means to be societally conscious, especially with regard to social and racial injustices. Superman embodies justice as a core aspect of his character and actions. He is literally associated with truth, justice, and the American way, and is a founding member and leader of the Justice League. By definition, Superman is a woke character, and he's been depicted that way since before all of you watching this video were born. Gary here is using the word the way other low IQ bigots use the term, as a dog whistle for bigotry against marginalized groups and those that advocate for marginalized groups. And sorry to burst your bubble, racists and sexists, bigotry is consistently shown in scientific studies to be correlated with lower IQ. So for all you racists trying to use IQ scores to justify your bigotry, all you're doing is telling on yourselves.
Yes, science! It works, bitches.
But the criticisms or praise of this film will be based solely on the work, which was a lot like what we did when we argued in the comic shop, and I appreciate that. I've heard everybody's pal Tyrone Magnus compare it to Thor: Love and Thunder, which I don't think is an inaccurate description, but I think a better one would be tonally. It's a lot closer to Black Adam and all the previous DCEU films.
This is what happens when you go off script, Gary. You start to say obviously dumb shit. I'm sure most of the people watching this video have already seen Superman, and if you haven't, you probably weren't going to anyway. But my point is that we all know that Superman does not have a similar tone to Black Adam or the other DCEU films. That's the whole point of the reboot, to not do what the DCEU did. But I'm sure Gary will have a great explanation for this take, right? Right?
But you still have to tell a good story, something those Bronze and Silver Age comics, which get a bad rap, did better than most of modern Hollywood. And it's something we really didn't get with Superman's James Gunn. It was more like a series of things that happened. And this makes me think of a great video out there from Trey Parker and Matt Stone explaining the basics of storytelling.
We can take these beats, which are basically the beats of your outline, and if the words "and then" belong between those beats, you're What should happen between every beat that you've written down is either the word therefore or but. Okay, this happens, right? And then this happens. No, it should be this happens, and therefore this happens. But this happens, therefore this happens.
No, I don't know what any of it means. Like, I have no clue what it means. I have no clue what any of that stuff ever meant.
That's right, James Gunn has decided to take that advice and do the opposite. As a matter of fact, I'll just break down the plot as it goes in the movie. After an event that happens off screen where Superman stops an invasion from totally not Russia into totally not brown Ukraine or totally not Israel into totally not Palestine, I didn't see it that way. But if some people see Israel portrayed this way, well, maybe some people working on this film are forgetting who signs their checks and who their agents are.
This is a textbook example of an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, the idea that Jews control Hollywood. In this case, Gary isn't being subtle. He implies that James Gunn should be careful about portraying a fictional stand-in for Israel negatively because of who signs his checks. That's not a dog whistle, it's practically a foghorn. And given Gary's well-documented disdain for Hollywood, the implication is clear. If Jews run Hollywood and Gary constantly attacks Hollywood as corrupt or evil, then he's targeting Jews by proxy. It's the transitive property of math.
And then Krypto saves Superman so the Superman robots can save Superman.
It's amazing how you played the earlier clip about how storytelling should work, and you somehow still don't understand it. Just saying "and then" here is you attempting to be dishonest and disingenuously frame these events as if they aren't interrelated. Superman loses a fight and has multiple broken bones. Therefore, Krypto rescues Superman because he can't reach the Fortress of Solitude in his current state.
And then Superman goes back to Metropolis to get his ass beat by the Hammer of Baravia.
No, Superman is healed after being taken to the fortress. Therefore, he is able to return to the fight that he just got thrown from.
And then Lex Luthor, who despises Superman for making humans like him feel insignificant, invades the Fortress of Solitude and steals a message from Jor-El, Lara, and Krypto.
Wrong again. The engineer followed Superman to locate the fortress for Lex, as the fight with the hammer was a distraction. Once the hammer beats Superman again, the hammer flies off, regroups with Lex through the usage of a portal, and the trio uses the information gained from the engineer to enter the fortress. Therefore, they were able to use the message from Superman's parents against him, setting the events of the plot into motion.
And then Superman and the Justice Gang, featuring Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, Mr. Terrific, and Hawkgirl, fight a kaiju.
Another blatant manipulation of the events of the film. They don't just Fight a kaiju. Once Lex enters the Fortress of Solitude, the engineer states aloud that it's going to take some time to break into the computer as she worries Superman might return while she's working. Lex tells her he's thought of that and, therefore, releases the monster to keep Superman occupied.
Might take a while. What if the Kryptonian shows up?
Don't worry. I'm creating a distraction.
A few moments later.
It's an awfully small distraction. It'll get bigger.
And then, after Superman saves a bunch of people from being crushed by the kaiju Mr. Terrific killed, they all turn on him instantly when they find out he was actually sent there to conquer and get himself a harem.
You're saying that backwards. The footage the engineer collects proves the Kryptonians sent Kal-El to Earth to dominate them. Therefore, the people turn on him.
And then Lex convinces the government and General Flag to arrest Superman, who turns himself in.
At this point, you're just saying "and then" for your agenda. This is too easy. Lex proves the footage is genuine. Therefore, Superman turns himself in. You keep saying this shit as if these events aren't directly connected. You literally showed people giving a lecture on this. Just saying "and then" is not enough. You have to prove these events do not connect to the previous ones for there to be an "and then." That was Trey Parker's point, you goddamn moron. Listen to it again.
Right? So what I'm saying is that you come up with an idea and it's like, okay, this happens, right? And then this happens. No. It should be this happens, and therefore this happens. But this happens, therefore this happens. And that, as soon as we are able to, and literally sometimes we'll write it out to make sure we're doing it. We'll have our beats and we'll say, okay, this happened, but then this happens, and that affects this, and that does to that, and that's why you get a show that feels like, okay, this to that, to this to that, but this, here's the complication, to that. And there's so many scripts we read from new writers and things that we see.
God, I see movies.
And
you see movies that you're just watching, and it's like, this happened, and then this happens, and then this happens. That's when you're in a movie just going, what the am I watching this movie for? Just like, this happened, and then this happened, and this happened. That's not a movie, you know, that's not a story. Like Trey said, it's those two, but, because, therefore, that gives you the causation between each beat, and that makes that's a story.
Do you see how they're referring to causation? And in case that's too big a word for you, Gary, causation means something that causes something else to happen. And as I've demonstrated, each of these events that you keep saying "and then" to had a logical cause. You know, unlike how you started this video talking about Variety's red carpet interviews that have nothing to do with reviewing this film. And of course, Gary continues on with his fake "and then" spiel, which I assure you, after listening to all of them, all had a cause. This guy's media literacy has as much integrity as his hairline. Moving on.
But I'll give it to James Gunn for consistency because they had the same complexity and depth as the plot. I thought Nathan Fillion's Guy Gardner was pretty good, along with Anthony Carrigan's Metamorpho, and I thought Mr. Terrific was really good. No, I'm not going to say terrific.
All right, allow me to nitpick something here. Why is it that Gary chose not to pronounce Eddie Gathegi's name? Not even an attempt to learn how to pronounce it? I mean, this guy's about to be A-list, given the public's reaction to his character, which is going to translate into him becoming a larger part of the DCU, rivaling or even surpassing Cyborg's popularity in audience mindshare. I'm not the guy that cries racism for every little thing, but with Nerdrotic's track record, I wouldn't put specifically not making an effort for the black actor past him. After all, these are real thumbnails from Gary's channel. Note the ebonics.
I'd like to see more of the Justice Gang in a different movie, and I'm not the only one to point this out, but tonally, they come off just like the Justice Society in Black Adam.
No, they don't. What version of Black Adam did you watch? Another porn parody? Are you just saying this because there was a black man, a white man, and a young woman? That's exactly where the similarities end. Hawkman and Adam had this pointless dick measuring contest the whole movie, and Dr. Fate was a voice of reason. Mr. Terrific is not only nothing like Hawkman, he spends the majority of his screen time helping Lois because he trusts and wants to save Superman. There's a brief moment between Guy and Kal-El, but that was due to the news about his parents' true motives, and not because Guy thinks he's tougher than the other guy. Hawkgirl is barely in the narrative, there is no analog to Atom Smasher in this movie, and Cyclone got way more screen time in her film. You're just saying things.
Again, proving why mid-movies are the hardest to review of the rest of the additional cast, the best I could say is they're fine, I guess. The only characters I didn't like were Hot Girl and the Engineer, obviously, because they're women.
Remember, they're just jokes. We're all gonna die soon, and there's no sequel.
Unlike Ricky Gervais' Gary, you are unaware that jokes have punchlines. What was the punchline there? Haha, I'm a sexist? You can't hide behind the "they're just jokes" defense when you don't actually tell jokes.
And hey, Jimmy Olsen is white again, and his unassuming babe magnet character was kind of funny.
And you immediately follow up the "I'm just joking" defense with another bigoted statement. Explain what part of Jimmy Olsen's characterization requires him to be a white guy. He can't be a Korean or a Dominican or a Nigerian. He's a reporter. The only thing his character needs is to be a journalist. His ethnic background is completely immaterial to that job. That's the fundamental problem you racists don't understand when you ask dumbass questions like, why can't T'Challa be white? A character, any character, can be played by any ethnic group unless that character's ethnic background is integral to their characterization. For example, Red Skull needs to be a white guy because he's a Nazi, and the Nazis weren't recruiting non-white people into their ranks. Being white is integral to that character's characterization, but a character like Norman Osborn can be any racial ethnic group because his ethnicity is not a part of his characterization. I don't know what's so difficult to understand about this for you people besides the fact that you just don't like seeing other groups of people in these roles. This is a form of white defaultism, where white people are seen as the default human and any other type of human has to justify their existence within a story. The problem is that it's entirely artificial, as white people are a world minority and only have a majority in certain places due to exclusionary practices, meaning they have not yet justified their own existence in these stories, being a minority to the planet. Even with all the so-called race swaps in Hollywood, the most successful film franchise in history is still overwhelmingly white. It's almost like you people want a complete hegemony, and that's not gonna happen.
And Ma and Pa Kent were barely in it, and yes, they were portrayed as a stereotypical country bumpkin couple, but there was one funny scene that played out just like a phone call with my mom, who has never seen a second of my YouTube and thinks I'm on a radio show.
Good for her. I'm sure if she did know what you do, she'd be disappointed in the absolute piece of shit she raised.
Before the film, I heard a lot of lip service about this being a hopeful Superman. Within the film, I heard a lot of lip service saying Superman is popular, but at no time do I feel like there's any reverence or respect for the character from anybody within the film or making it. Oh, they like him, but again, they don't respect him. I'd also like to remind you that Superman gets kicked in the balls by Ultraman, and they end the movie with Supergirl calling Superman a bitch.
This is a completely dishonest framing of that part of the movie. In this film, Kara is portrayed as a free spirit archetype, and as such, she did not call Superman a bitch, she called him bitch. These have two different connotations. She used it in the same way that women use it with each other, aka a form of endearment.
Come on. Thanks for watching him, bitch!
Nerdrotic is lying to you, trying to whip up his grift bullshit that a woman is emasculating a man in a movie. It would be as if I, a black man, called a white man nigga. I'm not calling him a slur. I'm using a term black people use with no ill intention. What Gary is doing here is like saying I called that same white man the hard R N-word. This is textbook outrage farming.
The people are simple and profoundly confused, weak of mind, spirit, and body, lord over the planet as the last son of Krypton. Dispatch of anyone unable or unwilling to serve you, Kal-El. Take as many wives as you can so your genes and Kryptonians' might and legacy will live on in this new frontier. Do us proud, our beloved son. Rule without mercy.
Fuck this movie. That's arguably, oh hell, it's not even an argument. That is worse than Clark letting Pa Kent get sucked up into a tornado.
If you think that, then you're probably a fucking moron. This doesn't really have anything to do with this man grifting, but all to do with his inability to understand the media that he's consuming. This is meant to contrast Clark from Kal-El. Kal-El was sent to Earth to rule over it by his real parents, but Clark learned how to be a human from his adoptive parents. And that's why Superman is good, because of the Kents. The logic as presented in this film is if his real parents were this benevolent group of people, it would narratively void the point of growing up in Smallville and the lessons his adoptive parents taught him. This turns the Kents into the true force of good and the reason Superman wants to protect the Earth and its people, thus making them extremely important to the narrative and mythos of this version of Superman. It's an incredibly effective narrative change.
I wanted it to be the best Superman movie ever made. I wanted to walk out of that theater feeling so good I would walk back in and watch it again.
And you would have, only if Daddy Drinker said he liked it first.